Mr. O's Music.
Hello you lot, and welcome to Mr. O's Music. My name is Richard Osmond, and I'm a school music teacher in the UK, hence the Mr. O moniker. This is a new channel on which I hope to be able to share with you some of the albums that I've most enjoyed over the years. I've been doing this in various forms with my pupils for many years, on forums, notice boards, but given the current COVID-19 lockdown, this seemed a good time for a reboot. In some cases, like today, I'll be sharing with you an album which contains one iconic track that you probably already know, and a lot of others that are, in my opinion, unfairly ignored. Now, one of the issues with a channel like this is always going to be copyright. Given that what I'm hoping to do is to persuade you to go out and listen to the albums that I'm talking about, it could be argued that I'm actually doing the artists a favour, but I don't want to push my luck. Therefore, any clips I use will be very short and are likely to be supplemented by my own vocal interpretations. And when I'm playing clips, I'll be giving my critical opinion of them as they play. I'll always put Spotify and Apple Music links to the full albums below the video, so you can go and explore them yourselves afterwards. As an aside, the main reason we're starting with this particular album is that a few weeks ago the BBC had a news item where they were talking about how we can recognise most music from very short clips of about 5 seconds or so, but some individuals, musicians in particular, can identify pieces of music from very short clips. And as an example, they played this, which, as I was wandering about the kitchen, I immediately identified, of course, as being the beginning of Stairway to Heaven. So it only seemed right to begin our journey of tiny audio clips describing a full album with the album from which that clip is taken, Led Zeppelin IV. So, to the album itself, which has no name. It's variously known as Zoso or Runes because of some of the artwork on the album, which was meant to represent the various members of the band, and I'm not going to show you the artwork here because really, if you thought the copyright law over music was strict, you should see the law over artwork. But it's most commonly known as Led Zeppelin IV because their first album was called Led Zeppelin I, their second Led Zeppelin II, their third Blue Donuts in a Plastic Sack. No, I'm kidding, it was Led Zeppelin III. And so Led Zeppelin IV seems to be a fairly obvious progression. The album was released in 1971 and it did extremely well, spending a total of 90 weeks in the UK charts. Most of the album, as you'll see, is based around really strong riffs, with other textures then being built around that. Interestingly, Stairway to Heaven is one of the main exceptions to that rule. But enough boring history, let's get to the music. Grabbing someone's attention at the beginning of an album is always really important, and Led Zeppelin manage it here in Black Dog with an extraordinary beginning of swirling guitars and other odd sounds going before Robert Plant comes in with declaimed unaccompanied vocals. This is followed by an explosion of guitars, all playing the same strong line, which builds to the most glorious series of cross rhythms. Lots of bell symbols and stuff. And for you GCSE music chaps, this entire section is a superb example of the power of the monophonic texture. The next track is a huge amount of fun. Rock and Roll is a standard 12-bar blues rock and roll song in which they sing about how much they miss playing rock and roll songs, and it really does sound like they mean it. It comes complete with a Jerry Lee Lewis-style tonic piano pedal at the top of the texture, again, played by Ian Stewart of the Rolling Stones. At the end of each verse, the band stops to let Robert Plant sing the final line, "Been a long time, been a long time, been a long, lonely, 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 lonely time," on his own. The best bit, though, is the end. As Plant reaches the end of his final "been a long time," a drum solo begins, which sounds more like somebody falling down the stairs, at the end of which the guitars rejoin with a strummed final chord, which concludes on an unconvincing subdominant. It sort of goes, been a long time, been a long time, been a long, lonely, 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 lonely time. It's totally weird and totally wonderful. Next comes the Battle of Evermore, and after those two hugely energetic openers, we need a rest. And so we come to this one where they introduce the haunting gentle sound of mandolins which fade in, playing a beautiful ostinato which continues throughout as Robert Plant croons gently over the top. Not a lot more to say about this one. It's just beautiful, fluffy music, and by that I mean like a cloud, not loads of mistakes, obviously. Its lovely soft sound leads us perfectly to the opening of the iconic track, Stairway to Heaven. I don't need to say much more about this because you all know it already, but I'm going to anyway. Why is it so special? It's got a beautiful opening riff which grabs us with its simplicity, and the addition of recorders on the repeat brings an unusual texture which makes us sit up and take notice even more. Almost a minute goes by before we hear Robert Plant's first exquisite notes, and we are then taken on a journey from that very soft beginning through the gradual build, with the drums only entering at about 4 minutes 15 seconds, to the point at about 5.5 minutes where the verse structure of the song collapses completely, leading to a new chord sequence with loads of meter changes, a superb guitar solo over a simple descending bass line which always wants to get to the dominant but never does, and then a final section which just repeats the same 3 chords over and over and over again, defying all logic as Robert Plant desperately screams in the background before leaving him on his own to finish as it began more than 8 minutes previously. It's got it all. Justly considered to be one of the greats. Now, in 1971, at this point, you would have needed to get up out of your chair. Obviously, they only had chairs in the early 70s. Sofas were only invented in about 1976, I think. And you would have had to have walked over to your record player and turned the LP over. All of those first 4 songs would have been played straight through without a break. So at this point, therefore, you might have taken the opportunity to make yourself a quick cup of tea. And so it was important for the band to give you a sense of continuity from one side to the other while also changing mood. And so for this second side of the LP, the next track starts in the same key as Stairway to Heaven finished. Misty Mountain Hop has such a weird intro. The electric piano seems okay. It's got a nice little riff going, do 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 do. But then just at the end, as the drums enter, an extra quaver gets shoved in, and no matter how hard I try, I can never figure it out and hear it as it's meant to be heard. I have no idea what's going on there. And if anyone can work it out, 5 gold stars for you. Then the song proper starts, and it doesn't get any better. The melody is very odd. 3 rising chromatic quavers sung in thirds which interplay with a straight crotchet beat to produce all sorts of crossbeat accents. It's very weird, but it works. And then this is followed by 4 sticks, apparently so called because the drummer John Bonham used 4 sticks to play the complex rhythms. I can't quite visualize that, but whatever. The song's got loads of energy, with a typical monophonic repeating riff that we're coming to recognize now as a trademark of the Led. Then, at the 1 minute mark, it suddenly all changes and opens up with beautiful slow keyboard and guitar melody, punctuated with guitar crashes as the drums continue to chug along in the background. It's great. Another winner. Next comes Going to California, which begins with quiet acoustic guitars pootling along happily to themselves. Robert Plant also seems very calm, singing gently. But then he says, rather than sings, "Watch out," which seems to be as much a comment on what's about to come in the music as it is a comment on the lyrics. He jumps up an octave and a half and declaims the next couple of lines in the minor while the guitars continue to happily chug away, seemingly oblivious to it all underneath. Great stuff. For this final track, we begin with a massive drum sound recorded with loads of reverb. This is followed by the massively over-distorted sound of an almost unrecognizable harmonica together with the guitars. In fact, everything in this track is clearly overloaded with loads of delay effects as well. It's a glorious mush. I'd go so far as to say that this track is really about the sound. Huge distortion, lots of flange, it's just very over the top. For me, probably the weakest on the album, and interestingly, it's the only one that's not written by them. It's actually a cover of a song recorded by Memphis Minnie and Kansas Joe McCoy in 1929. But it still has its moments. The lovely new major chord sequence introduced around 2.5 minutes in, for instance. In most other albums, this track would have been a total winner, but here it's in pretty special company. And that wraps up the album, one that really does deserve to be listened through without interruption. Have a listen to the whole album, please. Check the Spotify and Apple links below. And don't stop there. If you don't know any Led Zeppelin, there's a lot more amazing stuff out there by them. Do feel free to subscribe and click the bell and all that shenanigans. I'm new to this and I have no idea why it's a good thing to do, but everyone else says you need to do it. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe. That way, at least you'll know when I drop the next one in about a week's time. Thanks for staying through to the end. Drop me a comment if you've got an album you'd like me to promote. I'll ignore it, of course, but it'll make you feel like you're involved. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mr. O's music. Mr. O's music.